Good evening, everyone, and welcome to PRT. That stands for Paranormal Round Table, or Pretty Righteous Time, whichever one you want to call, depending upon how much you like our show. My name is Josh Turner. They also call me Wolf. You people can call me Mr. Turner or Senior Turner, and that's it. And PRTpodcast.com, PRTpodcast.com, that is our website. And PRT Podcast, Josh Turner at PRTpodcast.com. That is also my email address, Josh Turner at PRTpodcast.com. We also have groups on Facebook, Paranormal Round Table, Paranormal Encounters, which is Mushu's group. And we also do Whisper to a Scream, which is Ryan Tremblay. And last but not least, Paranormal Lounge, which is my wife Nellie's group. So hit those groups up on Facebook, folks. And if you, as always, we do a giveaway, and you might win an autographed book from one of multiple authors. We have anything from Linda Godfrey to Nick Redfern, and everything in between. So leave a comment on the link to the show on Paranormal Roundtable, the group, and we may give you an autographed book along with PRT swag. Be sure and check out our merchandise. It's sold on the store at prtpodcast.com. We also do artwork submissions, and don't forget about the art contest. So, that being said, we are here today. We're recording, and this is a show that we're going to do tonight that everybody has been clamoring for, that's been waiting. People have been hitting me up, and I got lots of stories on this one. At one time, I did not. I only had like maybe 2 or 3. Then I ended up with like maybe 4 or 5. A couple of them were really good, show-worthy. And now I have several. And it seems to be a phenomenon that has grown in the past, few years. It's gotten more and more prevalent. But today, I want to introduce my co-hosts. Today, I'm with Anthony and Zane. You want to say hello?
Good evening, everyone.
Hello, hello. How you doing?
Mushu has not been feeling well, and so he's not going to be here tonight. And I don't know exactly how much he's going to be being involved with the show. He's not been feeling good, and then he's also been working a lot and trying to make him some money. So he's doing a lot of work, and then also, like I said, he's not been feeling real well. So keep him in your thoughts so he gets better. He's had some issues with allergies, and his throat's been kind of scratchy. So anyways, that being said, we're going to talk about the phenomenon known as the Glimmer Man. I don't know what else to call it other than that. It seems to be an entity that can camouflage itself. I don't know what. I mean, it's such a weird topic.
Kind of like the Predator, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It is weird because people that see this thing, and Zane and Anthony, you've both done a little bit of research on it. They say that it has this like quality about it, almost like mirage. They call it like a mirror. I don't know what it is. I mean, it's so weird. I know I got a couple stories, and one in particular was really disturbing that me and my wife had fielded from a friend of ours. And I'm going to get into these stories. But first of all, you guys, if you have any crazy stories about any of the topics we've discussed in the past, go ahead and send those to me via email, or you can hit me up on private messenger if you're on Facebook with me. And I also wanted to point out something that's most important. If you send me a friend request on Facebook, please let me know that you're a listener of PRT so I don't have to ask. If you're a listener of PRT and you send me a friend request, I absolutely will approve it. As long as you're not, I can't look at you and then go, okay, this guy's a serial killer, because then I probably won't. But it's like, if you're not just obviously a very bad person and you're a listener of PRT, more than likely I'll accept your friend request. If not, and you don't tell me, and and I have to ask, which is a pain because I don't have a lot of time for that. And then if you don't respond, well, then more than likely you're not going to be approved. So just go ahead and make sure that if you want to be a friend of mine on Facebook, then send me a friend request. We also have a fan page for me. It's called Josh Turner from Paranormal Round Table, and then we have Paranormal Round Table fan page too. So those are also pages that we post stuff up on, and So that being said, getting all that out of the way, we're going to get back to the Glimmer Man here. The first story I wanted to tell comes out of Palmetto State Park. Anthony, do you want to tell people where that's at?
That's about 60 to 65 miles east of San Antonio. It's in between Luling and Gonzales.
Gonzales, Texas. Gonzales is a town that played a role in Texas independence. And you can research that and look that up. We're not going to get into the whole history of that, but it did play a role in the Texas-Mexican War.
Certainly required reading.
So here what we have in the Palmetto State Park, what went on was a friend of a friend that sent me this story, and he said, hey, there was this guy that he knew that claimed that when he would go hiking out in Palmetto State Park, that something would stalk him, that it followed him, and he never saw it, he never could hear it, or he never could see it, but he could hear it. And I myself personally have had something like that happen to me on posts where I could hear footsteps, but I couldn't see it, and I actually saw water move, but I didn't see anything shimmering or glimmering or anything like that. It was just dark. But this person claims that they actually saw something glimmer, and it was in broad daylight. They finally caught a glimpse of what it was, and it was they were walking along a trail, and they saw grass or weeds like being parted and move, and something came out on the trail behind them. They turned around looking toward the sun, and the sunlight was hitting this humanoidal figure just right, and it shone like almost like a greenish hue, but it was hair. There was hair all over the body. They didn't say it was fur. They said it was hair, and they said that it was a greenish hue, and that it was coming off of the sunlight was causing them to be able to see this weird, but it also gave off a reflective quality. And they said that this thing was about 7-8 feet tall, and that it was very large, and it was very wide. And they said that it was so wide that it took up the whole trail, and it was humanoidal. They could see almost like the arms and the legs moving. Now, here's another thing. And when people give you descriptions, especially when they're typing things, sometimes you just can't really understand what they're talking about. They said that it looked almost like pixelated, almost like Atari.
That's bizarre.
Okay, yeah. So not really understanding 100%. I'm like Atari, and there's like the squared off a pixelation of the Atari games.
Yeah.
That, and of course you guys grew up in a video game age where you didn't play with blocks and dots like we did. Like we had to use our imaginations that 4 little blocks was actually a guy chewing on pellets, and so you guys don't have that problem. Y'all can look at it. There's not much imagination involved. Heck,
I think we call that 8-bit.
8-bit, yeah. Well, even before that, it was. I don't even think Atari. I don't even think was 8-bit. Nintendo was 8-bit.
Yeah,
I don't know what it would have been, but it was pretty bad. Space Invaders with just little wiggly blocks with little squares. I mean, and it's hard when you look at Atari,
yeah,
especially from the home arcade,
right?
And then you look at it now, you're going like, oh, this is yuck. I can't even, it's terrible. Because you're like, oh, nostalgic. Let's play Defender, and you're like, that's Defender? What is that?
And that lasted all of 2 minutes.
A little squiggly line with other little lines coming off of it, and you're supposed to believe that that's a spaceship shooting aliens.
And the novelty wears off very quickly.
Very quickly, yes. And so, yeah, even with Nintendo, when you see there's the little mush that looks like the red and blue, and that's supposed to be Mario.
Right. Yeah.
And you're like, and then this brown puddle of whatever.
See, like first Mario?
Supposed to be Donkey Kong.
First Mario, that's 8-bit.
8-bit, yeah.
That's 8-bit, yeah. So whatever that is.
Well, Donkey Kong was on was the predecessor for it, and that was on Atari.
Mm-hmm.
But you had the arcades now. I think the arcade game might have actually been 8-bit, but then the home system was like below that. It was even
even worse.
I mean, it was just like squiggly lines and
those
puddles.
plug-in AVs.
But we better get back on track before we make people mad.
Yeah. Well, anyway, the point is that the guy said it looked like Atari. And so I never really did get to clarify exactly what that meant. So, if you can imagine the Atari home system, I guess is what I'm thinking, that it looked kind of like, was pixelated. But he said that at one point it did give off a mirror shine. But then when it got closer to him, because he was frozen, he said that it looked in the face, it kind of started to make the image of a man's face. He said there was hair all the way around it, like a beard, long hair. He said it was like pushed up over its head and pushed down. And the face began to be more clear. It had a greenish haze around it. And he said that it was like, you could see it when it moved, it would go in and out of like almost like it was glitching. And he said that the face was flat, like the nose was very broad and flat, gave off the appearance of very, very much like well, his words were Neanderthal, but I asked, it was a very primitive looking. He said, just like, yes, a protruding brow, like a very primitive looking creature.
Just distinct. That would be also
almost like
would be the
a Bigfoot made by Atari, I guess. I don't know.
Well,
so,
like, I think that implication is more that it was just distorted. It was
distorted.
It just wasn't easy to follow, I guess.
What he could have meant by saying that it looked like it was pixelated is if you've ever picked up like a little crystal as a kid and you looked inside it and like you see like those little triangles or different shapes inside of it, and you, kind of like a kaleidoscope, you know.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
If you look inside it, like one of those little crystallized rocks or whatever, that could have been something along the lines of what he saw.
Yeah, it's just hard to make out.
Yeah, it's hard to fathom because I'm not him, and I didn't. It was just written. But having talked to him through the email, whatever, it was weird. It was a weird story, and so but it gets weirder. So he tried to continue to walk backwards. He tripped, and then he jumped right up, and he turned, and he panicked, and he ran. So this is what he said. Supposedly, this thing ran him down. He could hear the footsteps behind it, and it kind of grabbed him and pulled on him. He was wearing like a hoodie, and then it kind of went forward, and he said that it almost like punched or slapped his back or shoved him. He couldn't really decide exactly. He just felt like really strong pressure, like from hands, and he couldn't really decide whether it was a punch, a slap, or a push, and he went flying about 10 feet through the air. And at that point, he felt like, oh, I'm in danger. He said he did roll, and he kind of hopped up. He said he hopped up, and he continued to run, and he said that he did hurt his ankle pretty bad, but that he just it didn't even feel the pain. The adrenaline was going. And he said that he kept running, and this thing was right on his heels, right behind him. And he said that at that point, he heard two hikers coming down the trail, coming the other way. And this thing turned. He turned around and looked. He saw it, and it cut off into the woods and just disappeared. And he said the whole time, this squared-looking, pixelation-looking creature just disappeared into the tree line.
Did it leave any tracks or footsteps or anything?
I don't think he even bothered with that. He just took off. Yeah. And that was the end of that.
Yeah, I don't know why he would look for that. I wouldn't either. I'd just run away.
Yeah, that's what he did.
I'd be thankful to escape with my life.
I did ask him, though, if he warned the two joggers or hikers that were coming down the trail, and he said nope.
No time.
I mean, why would you? Like, what
is gone? You know,
what are you going to tell him? Well, there's an invisible giant man. Look out! They're just going to keep jogging. Like, oh, that dude's on crack.
16-bit Sasquatch.
Yeah,
in the woods. Just
now it's 16-bit.
Yeah.
Earlier it wasn't even. It's like
I mean, we're in the 3D world, so you got to give it a little more definition.
Apparently, it was going in and out of bits. It was like it ended up at 32, and then the PlayStation 1, and then. Yeah.
So was there any sort of smell that he
I asked him
picked up?
about that, and he said that he smelled like you know how this is the words that some of these people use, and I'm not insulting him or anything, but bog water, like if stale water,
swamp
like a stagnant smell to it, and the greenish hue. I wondered about that. I thought maybe it was hanging out in the swamp or something. I mean, it's a swampy area, you know. I mean, maybe I don't know. I mean,
well, see, greenish hue kind of gives me like the mountains of Russia, those orbs, like the hue that they give off. Like it's real distinctive because, like, it's more specific to like that area. Because every time you hear something coming out of the area, I believe it's somewhere like in the mountains of Russia. The highest parts, they always have these orbs that they talk about, and there's a few real prominent stories, but there's always like a light that people see or like a strange, I don't know, well, like a glimmer that kind of surrounds the outside of it. So I'm sure it's probably the same sort of thing, you know, it just kind of had this aura, you know, like about it.
Yeah, or it could be
drifting around in the woods and such.
If he saw this thing like in a wooded area, like in a wooded or like swampy area, and most of the surroundings themselves are green, I mean, maybe it's like a really advanced form of camouflage, like a chameleon on steroids, because a chameleon can do the same thing.
Well, how do you explain the pixelation though?
I don't know. Well,
same thing. You know how like octopuses, they'll switch from one color to like the other almost instantaneously, but there's kind of a weird thing in like between that when like you see
intermediate.
Yeah. So like maybe that's the effect that you're probably seeing when, whatever happens.
I also know that there's like an experimental technology that's it's not like a secret thing. It's public information, and you can look it up on YouTube and see a video of it. But over at some university, I can't remember which, but they've developed a way to make extremely small objects become quote unquote invisible. Which invisibility is not really a matter of disappearing; it's just a matter of bending light rays.
Yeah.
And what they did is that they put it was like a thread, just like a regular piece of thread, and they put it in some water, and they flip on whatever machine or whatever device that they have that's able to bend light rays in a way that will make that thing disappear. And
it's called a Rochester Cloak.
There you go.
Yeah.
And it disappears like just instantaneously. Maybe that's what they're seeing in the woods, but I don't know, and I have no idea why something like that would be out there, or how on God's green earth any creature would be able to develop that ability. But
green earth being the operative words,
right?
I don't know. I mean,
the way it works.
Not saying I believe in the animal
kingdom. It's the way it normally works in like the animal kingdom is that their skin develops. It's like. It's not beads, but it's like kind of like a prismatic sort of pattern, like on top of the skin or whatever it is, fur, just whatever. But they're able to change form, and the actual skin moves and refracts light. And that's how, much like you were saying, like it just refracts the light around the actual thing itself.
Yeah.
So just to imagine, I don't know how large the Glimmer Man is, but to be in the woods and then see something that can refract light around it, like that's a real mind.
Yeah, mind bending.
Yeah, that's very mind bending. Like no one's gonna be able to look at that and make heads or tails of what they just saw. Like seeing pixels and refraction. Whatever. That sounds to me like what that process would be. Just like seeing like the bits and the just all that in between part, all those moving parts. It I don't know, that'd be crazy to see, because just watching normal sea life do it is just wild.
Yeah,
watching a bipedal creature with yellow eyes do it in the forest is even.
Well, this one didn't have yellow eyes, because I asked about the eyes and he didn't say anything about the shine.
Oh.
This story here I got from a buddy of mine. His name is John, and he's on my Facebook. He's in all my groups, and his friend gave him this story, and he gave me this story. The guy was hunting, deer hunting, here in Central Texas, back in 2010. Said it was a beautiful, clear day, and he just finished tracking a deer that morning, and he gave up. So he went up to a deer stand to eat his lunch and relax, and he was up there for a while, and he said he got this eerie feeling. Like, how when something's watching you and you're being watched. And he said he took out his binoculars and he started looking around, and that's when he noticed that there was like this mirage-looking thing standing at the tree line across from him about 50 yards or so. And he said it looked weird, like there was a distortion around it, kind of like when heat comes up off the pavement on a highway. And he said he focused on the thing, began to notice very troubling to him that it looked humanoid in appearance. Yet he could see through it. He said that he could see through it, and that it looked like he said it was hard to explain, but it looked like a mirage. Those are his words. And said another way to explain it would if you looked at a bunch of small mirrors and they were all attached to a grown man that covered his entire body. And they said he watched this thing. He was stationary for a good 5 minutes, and then all of a sudden it started moving toward his position. And then it got across the field, and it seemingly vanished. And once it hit the wooded area, and it just disappeared. And so he said, I didn't see it again for about 30 minutes or so. And he had this feeling that he was being watched, and he couldn't shake it. And he said that, he was on high alert at that point, head on a swivel. And as time went on, he said maybe an hour or so, he goes, I got back to what I was there for and hunting deer. I tried to just put it out of my mind, And I said he was scanning the area, and then all of a sudden he heard leaves crackling beneath his tree stand, and he looked around. He didn't see anything. And then all of a sudden he heard the sound of someone grabbing and walking up the metal ladder beneath him to get up into the stand that he was in. And he said he didn't see anything climbing up. And he thought, man, I'm losing my mind. All of a sudden this shimmering, glimmering silhouette of a humanoid appeared up through the hatch door and proceeded to go up into the hatch door, get this, closed it, casually walks up and sits down next to him. And he said as he was staring at it, it became more clear. And he said whatever this thing was, it had the ability to blend into its surroundings like a chameleon. And he said the weirdest thing is that he didn't feel threatened. He said it just got really weird. And he said it got weirder, that it began to mimic him. And he said what it did was, he goes, I would turn my head and it would turn its head. He goes, I would give it a peace sign and it would give me a peace sign. He's like, I stood up, it stood up. He goes, I attempted to speak to it, but it was completely mute. It never responded. It never communicated back. And he said this whole sequence lasted for over 10 minutes with it mimicking. And he said it was almost as if the thing was playing a game with him. And finally, he's like, I kid you not, this thing looked at me, and where its eyes would be, the left one lit up in a purple glow for a split second, as though it was winking at him. And then it grabbed the rail of the deer stand window and flung itself upward on top of the deer stand and then vanished, leaping into the canopy. And, I know that sounds strange, folks. You think maybe, he's been watching too much Predator, but he swears this is what happened. And he said, yeah, I asked him, I said, the Predator. And he said, he's like, I've seen the Predator. It's a good movie, but this thing, it didn't resemble the Predator. It was like if you took that cloaking ability that the Predator had in the movie and gave it just to a human. But for some odd reason, whatever the thing was, it was more than human due to its crazy acrobatics and its mimicking antics. Those were his words. So that's just strange. That's a weird story. I don't know what to make of that. You guys at home, you can make up your own minds about it. I know that having talked to many people about the whole Glimmer Man phenomena and what it is and or what it could be, I've wondered many nights on what these things are. When I was a kid, I'll tell you a story. I had a friend when I was a kid, and I might have mentioned something similar to this before, because I stayed at his house one time, and one of his toys moved, and the closet door and I was like, okay, I want to go home. That was the only time I ever left a slumber party and was like, I want to go home. But he told me a story years ago when we were little kids about an entity, because his house was haunted. And there were other kids that we hung out with when I was little. This was in elementary school, first, second, third grade. And he had a big, scary 2-story house, and all the other kids were like, oh, Jonathan's house is haunted, blah, blah, blah. And they kind of made fun of him sometimes about it. We'd be like, oh, your house is haunted. Nobody wants to go there, and I kind of felt bad for him. But he was very honest about it. And he said that one time when he was little, one of our friends, Mickey, asked him, he's like, hey, what does the ghost look like? And he said that he saw this shadow move into the room, almost like it was floating, and it looked like it was like a. This is going to sound weird. He said it looked like a man, but it was like it was wearing some sort of dress-like thing. Which, when he described it later on as an older kid, you're thinking, oh, that's a cloak. And he said that when he sat up bolt upright, that it moved its arms together like in an X. And it began to change into a shimmering, and then it just became invisible. And then he could see it, still kind of the outline of it moving around the room, almost like it was cloaked in a, not just an actual physical cloak, but like it was mirage, like it was a mirage. And he said you could see through it, but you could still see the outline of it. And I always thought that was weird. And I just remember when we were kids, there was a show called Justice League, and it was the DC characters. And Wonder Woman had an invisible jet, but you could see through the jet, but then you saw the white outline of the jet, and I was kind of thought maybe that's what he was talking about. But I don't know if that pertains to this, but I just remember him saying that and thinking that is weird. But moving on, this one here happened in Wichita, Kansas. Guy sent me this story. I'll call him David. Did not give me permission to give his real name. But David was a little kid, and his dad would do work. He was a plumber, and he would go to different places and whatever. And so the office there at that cement plant was having plumbing problems. And so his dad would let him just go ahead and play and run around out. Because, back in the 70s and 80s, we weren't worried about it. We ate lead chips and we did all kinds of junk. My dad used to go work at this place where they sold dirt and gravel. And I would climb up and down on these hills. And one time, I was climbing up on one of these hills with all these rocks. They were all about the same size, and I began to sink down into it. And you could still breathe, and it wasn't like it was crushing me, but I got all the way down to my waist and started screaming. And then my dad, who was an electrician, kind of like this guy's dad was a plumber, he came out and was like, "What are you doing?" And I started to kind of swim my way to the edge, and I fell and slid down, and then I jumped out of the pit of the hill, and my dad was yelling at me, but he was also like, concerned.
Yeah. Extremely worried.
Yeah. And was like, he got onto me and told me to go sit in the truck and no more playtime. But this kid, he kind of did what I did. He was running around playing, and he said that there was a tree line all the way around one side of this at that time. And he said that he saw this, what looked like something laying down flat, and it was like crawling, and he thought, whoa, that's weird, because it was reflecting, the light of the sun was reflecting off of it and causing like a prism,
right?
Like with different colors. And he said it was like every color of the rainbow you could imagine, even colors that you would not, he's like, colors I still haven't even seen to this day again. And he goes, it was so weird. He goes, and me being a little 7-year-old punk, which he literally called himself a 7-year-old punk, not my words, David, yours, but he said he picked up a rock and he threw it at it. And he said that this thing popped up, like just boom. And it was like upright. And he said it was probably 6-7 feet tall. And he said that it looked thin, though. You could see the outlines of it. And he said that the rainbow effect kind of disappeared, and it had this cloaking looking whatever on it. And he said the only thing he could describe it as, which a lot of people say, it looked like the Predator. And he said when it moved, and then he heard a whistling noise coming from it, like that. And then he said that within a couple seconds, he looks up and he sees what may have been another one up in a tree right there by this plant or whatever. And he said there was just a real thin tree line. It was like just a couple trees right there. It wasn't like there was a lot, like a big woods or anything. And he said that this thing made like this whistling noise, and then the other thing kind of moved. And then he said that it kind of went toward him. And then he said he got scared, so he started backing up. Like, oh no, what did I do? I stumbled into something, these things that, his dad was inside the building, and he was like, I got to get to my dad. And he said his dad was probably like, 60, 70 yards away, and his little legs weren't going to get him fast enough. He said this thing started moving quickly towards him. And he said it closed the distance into about 30 to 40 feet away. And he said he could see right through it. But then when it moved, it kind of made a reflection like off of the area around it. Like it looked like the dirt on its feet, but then above it, it looked like, the sky. So it was like very weird. And then he said that he said that as he turned to run, he felt something thunk him in the back of the neck really hard. And he looked down, and it was a rock. So the rock that he had thrown at this thing, I guess it was just like, hey, here's your rock back. Boom. And it hit him. And he said that it stung, like it hurt him, And he said that he didn't even stop. He just kept moving, kept running. And just eventually got to the building where his dad was working, and he went inside and he closed the door, and he said he looked out the window and he kept looking and nothing. He didn't see anything, But here's the thing. Years later, he was going out with this girl who was a waitress at this dive bar out on the edge of town. at this town he was living in Kansas, another town he was living in. And they started talking, and this guy at this bar said one time when he told that story, he goes, I'll tell you, he goes, one time I was driving down that road going by that cement plant, and he saw something standing on the side of the road while it was raining, and he said that you could see the rain bouncing off of it, but it almost looked like it was see-through. But he said that he clearly saw like what would look like an arm going up over the top of its head, like where its head would have been. And get this, like when you were talking about the eyes were orangey yellow.
Yeah.
He could see the eyes, but nothing else. It was just like there was this rain beating up and bouncing off of something that was obviously there. And he said, like, imagine a wind chill where the rain's just, and he's like, he just saw it clear as day, just sitting there. And he said that guy told him that, and he was like, oh my gosh. So that thing had been in and around that area probably for a while. So I don't know what y'all think of that.
But this one was in the shape of a man too, right?
Yeah, humanoidal shape. But this thing was like laying down, and I guess he threw a rock at it because a kid, he's like, "What is that? I'm gonna throw a rock at it,"
Right.
It's like something I probably would have done as a kid. I would have shot it with my BB gun because I was, I still to this day I think I shot at a wolf when I was a kid. I saw one, oddly enough, on the edge of a cement plant that was not too far from where me and my friend Keith grew up, and I shot at what I thought would look like a wolf, and it turned and it made the decision to go the other direction. But if it wouldn't have, I'm thinking, what would I have done? Because I was like 8, 9 years old, and I was on my bike, and this thing would have just came and tore me up. I say it wasn't a coyote because I know what coyotes look like, and it didn't look like a coyote. It looked like a red wolf, which there are a few in that area.
My advice is high ground.
Yeah,
hindsight 2020.
I mean,
definitely that.
So I don't know. What do y'all want to discuss that one or go on to the next case?
I think this thing could be some sort of extraterrestrial because the ability to refract or reflect light to that extent it doesn't sound like an evolutionary adaptation at all. There's nothing natural about it. Mm-hmm. I mean, camouflage is one thing, like we talked about earlier, but this is a whole different level, a whole different thing. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, if it's not some sort of extraterrestrial being or technology, then it's some sort of government technology. I have no clue, but I don't think this is something natural or supernatural.
I don't know a lot about it, whatever it is, but the only other thing in that story that seems to line up, besides the normal, it disappearing or whatever, is the fact that it had burnt orange or yellow eyes. That seems to be a very common reoccurring theme for this one particular cryptid. And that's what stuck out to me. I don't know behaviorally if it acted any differently or, not, because it doesn't seem to ever make any noise. There's no noise. There's no, what's the word I'm looking for here? There doesn't seem to be any obvious reason for why it's there. Doesn't seem to be any obvious reason for why it decides
like chance
to interact.
Encounters.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like it goes out of its way to interact with people. And when it does, it doesn't actually seem to be violent.
Well, the one in Palmetto State Park would attacked him.
Right. Yeah.
But it could have probably done worse as big as it was.
It seems tame.
Territorial, maybe.
If not odd.
Well, I'm going to get into one that's not so tame. This one happened in a cow pasture out in Oklahoma. The odd thing about this one is this pasture was not far from a lake where supposedly, and it's funny saying we were talking off the air about the octopus,
right?
Cephalopods and how they, and I have a friend Edward, who believes that one day they're going to rule the earth. Which is, I'm not going to sit here and say, yeah, you're right or you're not.
Right.
He's a marine biologist and he really believes that, and he works down in the Gulf of Mexico, and so. This happened in a cow pasture, and this one was like I said, not far from a lake where there was a freshwater octopus that was caught. And so I'm going to get into that eventually at some point. I was talking to Scott Martis recently about coming on and maybe doing a show about that. And then me and Ryan kicked around doing a show about these freshwater because he did a lot of research on these. But this one involved what could be a type of octopus that was on the land. I say that because it had more than 4 limbs. This thing was wrapped around a tree, and at first it was what appeared to be like one of these rake-type creatures.
Right.
I say that because of the way the description was given to me. These guys were driving through a cow pasture. One of them was sitting on the tailgate of the truck, and the other 2 were inside, and then another guy was sitting on the back wheel, the hump over the wheel,
well,
in the back of the wheel well, and he was sitting on that, and they were spotlighting, and they saw that, which is that's one way to hunt, but it's whether you agreed with it or not. That's what they were doing, and they spotlighted this thing that looked at first like it was white, but then almost instantaneously, 3 of them. The guy on the passenger side and then the 2 in the back. The driver didn't see it, but it went from white to translucent real quick, and they claimed that it had 4 arms, like limbs, wrapped around the tree, and its head was completely turned backwards. And then there was like a bit of a space, like a foot or 2, and then there where the legs would have been, it was wrapped around, and then they saw what might have been a tail. Which, then again, it could have been another limb. It could have been like 8 limbs. We just didn't see the rest of it.
Right.
And they said that when the light hit it, like this happened in a matter of milliseconds, like boom, boom, boom. It went from white to translucent and then just disappeared. But when the light was on it, it was like reflecting it, and they could still see it moving along the tree, and it went around the other side of the tree. So they were like, hey, drive over there. Let's go see what it is. So they drove over there. And at this point, it was gone from the base of the tree, and it had climbed up into the tree, and then from there, jumped onto another tree, and they could see it. They were seeing it jump from tree to tree, and it had multiple arms, and it did have that same quality of being shimmery, glimmering, whatever you want to call that. And they did take some shots at it. One of them even thinks he might have hit it, but he wasn't for sure. But he said the whole time it was making a whistling, shrieking noise. So, I don't know what to make of this one. Then this is a story I got a long time ago, back when I was not even doing my podcast. I got that story probably 5 years ago, and that story, when I first heard it, I was like, "What in the heck is that?" It was like a one-off. But yeah, it could be one of these rake wendigo type creatures, an octopus type creature, or I don't know, a Glimmer Man. It could fit into a lot of different categories,
right?
And eventually, it got away, and of course, whether you believe in the there's a moral conundrum there. I'm not just gonna. If it was me personally, I'm not just going to see something that's not bothering me, not doing anything to anybody, and just go, "Oh, I'm going to shoot that. There it is. Kill it, Ned. It's coming straight for us." But yeah, but I'm not them's, and I don't know the threat level. I mean, they seem to be pretty shooken up by it. But
well, it sounds very off-putting. Just the imagery alone, head backwards, wrapped around a tree, 4 limbs up top, who knows what at the bottom.
They should probably consider themselves lucky that it went transparent and they couldn't see it. It sounds disgusting looking.
Yeah, like it doesn't sound.
I wouldn't want to look at that thing.
And
thank you for disappearing.
Yeah. And that seems like a worse encounter, but that's still not. I mean, like aggressive.
No,
that's not.
It tried to get away.
It's weird. It's just not.
It didn't want to be in the light.
Yeah.
But and then if you look at, they said there's more to this case, because I asked one of the guys that was sitting in the back of the truck, and I talked to him, and I asked him point blank. I was like, "Hey, did you go back?" And he said, "Yeah, we did. We actually went back and we looked at the tree." And he said that there was like this slime all over the tree, like a moisture. And he said that when you rubbed it against your fingers, it was like jelly. And I asked him, did anything come of it? No, nothing. No allergic, anything.
Is that what color it was?
No, it was clear. It was like a clear,
clear.
Jelly. It was like a jelly. It was all over the tree. And he said that the guy whose pasture it belonged to said that sometimes the cows would be like staying away from certain areas of the pasture, certain trees. They wouldn't go into certain areas, you know. So, you know, when they told him about it, the guy didn't even seem surprised. Like maybe he knew something they didn't, you know. Right. And it was the guy they talked to was the friend of theirs' dad who told them, yeah, y'all can go as long as you don't shoot my cows, I don't care. But yeah, that's a weird story. I heard a story similar to that. Now, this one was told to me by a friend of a relative who was in Vietnam. Now, here again, this guy, I mean, I'm just gonna be real honest. He smoked a lot of pot, you know. But I mean, just because you smoke pot doesn't mean you're out of your mind. I mean, there's some people think you smoke pot and you see pink elephants. Well, I don't know what you're lacing it with.
Devil's lettuce.
Yeah, but just because you smoke pot doesn't mean you're out of your head and you don't know what time of day it is. Unless you're like the dude from Brad Pitt from True Romance over there, you know, you're like, oh man, we can kill you, man. But you know, but this guy, he did smoke a lot of pot. But he told me that one time when he was in Vietnam, that they had treed this thing that looked like a hairless white monkey that had multiple limbs. And then when it got up into the tree and they began to shoot at it, that it went blank. And I asked this guy, you know, and of course I'm trying to talk to the guy and he is inebriated. Right. Yeah. And he goes, it went blank. And I said, what does that mean? Yeah. You know, this was a friend of my dad's, and his friend, my dad's friend, Steve, who's no longer alive, but one of their friends, you know, and I used to go and play with his sons because they were my age. And I said, what does that mean? And Steve, my dad's friend, was always a character. He goes, what does that mean going blank? Like, what, it just went blank? Like, it just, like, you know, you're not explaining it to us. And he goes, what I mean is it disappeared. And he's like, it disappeared how? And he's like, well, it just went up the tree and then it just, like, you know, went clear. Like, it was like you knew it was there, but you couldn't see it. Yeah. You know what I mean? And my dad's friend was like, no, I don't know what you mean. I have no idea what you're talking about. It makes no sense. But as a kid, I remember hearing that story and I was always up for hearing weird and creepy stories. And whenever they started talking about weird stuff, you know, I was right up there trying to hear. But anyway, yeah, that was a weird story. I remember that and them talking about a monkey. Now, on this case here, I asked the guys in this pasture in Oklahoma, I asked them, what did the head look like? Because they said they did catch a quick glimpse of this thing. Now, here's the funny thing. They said that the head, it had no neck from what they could see. It was like it went up and there was just like a roundness and there was like a head. Now, when you think about that, how we were talking, Zane, about an octopus. Right. Like it just, there was like no chin, no nothing. It was like a face, kind of like a face. Yeah. They didn't see much of a mouth. It was just like a crease, you know, from what, you know. But here's the messed up part. The guy in the driver's side who I don't think he would have had as good of a vantage point as the guy that was sitting on the tailgate. He claimed that he did see a mouth and that it opened up its mouth to make the hissing noise that they heard. And the other two of the guys in the back said they don't remember that. So you got a dispute there. Right. You know, but yeah, that's weird. And of course, Zane, you kind of know this because we talked about it earlier. And Anthony, the eyes were yellow, yellowish orange. Yeah. So there you go. There again, it's the whole
that thing too. Though it did actually make a noise, supposedly. Mm-hmm. You know, so it does maybe communicate or something. It at the very least makes noise.
That sounds to me like a primitive form of extraterrestrial life. Because if you think about it, life on our planet, we have advanced life forms like hominids, aka us, and then we have animals, which are a lot more primitive forms of life, but they are a form of life from our planet. So I mean, if life does exist on some other planet, on at least one out there, somewhere out there in the stars, and you know, maybe it's the same way. They have advanced life forms, which are what people see piloting UFOs and whatnot. And maybe these things are just their, like, that planet's version of primitive life.
Of like what a dog would be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Maybe it's somebody's pet.
Some weird animal that just... Yeah.
I mean, just like, okay, extraterrestrial wildlife, something like that.
Right. So what do you think about the idea of like seeding, you know?
That's something we've talked about with the...
I was going to say, because...
I think we talked about that on the what was it, the Bigfoot, what was it called? The we talked about the seeding of the life. I can't remember what episode that was.
Was it a Bigfoot episode?
Yeah, it was a celestial Bigfoot.
Oh yeah, celestial Bigfoot.
Yeah, we talked about seeding because that is, yeah. I mean, I got another quick one for you. I got several of these Glimmer Man stories. I mean, there's a lot of them. I'm going to try the ones we don't finish up. I'm going to try to put them on a potluck, but I'll give you this one. This one happened on Ranch Road 12 right outside of San Marcos, and it was given to me by a friend of mine's girlfriend who she swears up and down that they were driving down Ranch Road 12 right outside of San Marcos where Texas State, the university is. And this is a short one. It's not real long, but you guys are very familiar with the Devil's Backbone. Since y'all were kids, I've been taking you out there and running around and looking at all the spooky crap out there. But they were driving down the road and they saw this thing run across the road. And when it ran right in front of their vehicle, their headlights caught a glimpse of what looked like there was hair coming off of the arms, like it was like hairy, but then it was like almost instantaneous, like it was clear. Like it went clear, like it. They don't know how it got out in front of the vehicle. They didn't see it get in front of the vehicle, so obviously it was some sort of camouflage that was keeping it, from being noticed. Right. And then the next thing you know, they're going 55 miles an hour down this windy road, and right in front of the vehicle, it's a clear, translucent, and then the light hits it just right, and they see like this hair. Long hair coming off of the arms and running down the legs. Nobody really got a good look at the face because the face, they said, stayed sort of blocked, I guess. And it just stayed looking straight ahead. The only thing they got from the side of the face was it was humanoidal. And then it just ran across the road. And then it went, like as soon as it crossed out of the light, it was invisible. And it ran across the road. So... And they said it happened really quick, and they were like, "Oh, what is that? Woo!" 4 people in a car, and then it was across the road, and that was
definitely a defense mechanism. If that's, I mean, I feel like that it just going clear or going, whatever it's going, it's obviously cloaking itself, or maybe the light as soon as it hits its body, it just reacts in a certain way, maybe, and it just goes like invisible. But it doesn't seem to me like. It's not to harm anything. It just seems like every
a survival mechanism.
Yeah, like it just seems like every time someone sees it, it just they may catch a glimpse of it because they're close enough, but there's no real detail, there's no definition, and then it just leaves, or it at least tries to leave.
Whenever they see it and it's already camouflaged, or when it's already transparent, maybe it's already transparent because this entity saw them before they saw it, and it cloaked itself.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe.
Probably just another thing that doesn't want to be found.
But it's hairy, though. I mean, you got hairy ones, and you got like clear ones and white ones, and I mean.
Well, see, the clear and like the white, I kind of just give off as like, because what happens to the human body when you see something strange and something that might be, I don't know, violent or just very like otherworldly? What happens the first thing? Okay, your stress levels go up. You start kind of not getting in a panic, but your just whole body kind of starts moving at a faster rate because there's fear, there's wonder, there's the big question of like, what is it? Is it going to hurt me? In this situation, you're in a car, you're driving down the road, you're in a very strangely,
Yeah, Nick called it metaphysical shock.
Yeah,
it's a good term.
You're in a place that's not well populated by normal people. I mean, there's really nothing out there besides woods and besides big rock carapaces and, just things of that nature. But, you have those kind of things. So all of that is going to hit you as soon as you see something that strange, especially in front of you, especially if you're thinking like, you might hit it or whatever. But it's just weird that out of all of these encounters, it doesn't seem like it wants to be looked at, but that clear and that blank and that white thing, I think that's just a feature of it. Like, you're not really going to be able to see it. It might have hair, but it's not going to let you know that it has hair. It's not going to show you that. And I don't think that anyone's been in this situation, at least with the stories that I've read and, from like some of the stuff that I've looked up, there's nothing that makes it obvious that that it's just
aggressive.
Yeah. Like it's not an aggressive entity,
Yeah, well, like it doesn't want anything. It just exists.
Right.
Yeah, here's one for you. This happened in Delaware. And actually, if anybody knows about the Dover demon, I was just talking to Ryan about that the other day and how that could be one of these rake/crawler entities. This one's kind of weird. Like this, I was going to do this one on the Paranormal Christmas, and so I decided. Me and Nelly were talking, and I was like, I'm just going to go with the Krampus, and we're just going to ex-nay the Paranormal Christmas and just put them into potlucks and whatever. But then we just got more and more stories about the Glimmer Man and this one, because after I mentioned it, people were like, oh yeah, the Glimmer Man. This guy sent me a story, and he said that this happened to him and his dad when they were putting up Christmas lights in Dover, Delaware when he was a child. And he's now in his 40s, so he's around my age. And he said that they were up on the roof putting up Christmas lights, and they were in a good mood, and they were all like, he was happy. It was Christmas time, and it was right after Thanksgiving. And it was dark, and his wife his mom was down on the patio looking up and kind of giving them a direction, whatever. And they hear something walking, like, and it was like heavy, and you could hear it on the shingles of the roof. And him and his dad look over, and they're like, they didn't see anything. And next thing you know, the strand of lights moved, and you could see like the movement. And he looked down for a second, and when it touched the lights, he saw what looked like a foot. But the foot, he said, looked clawed, which is weird. He said, I saw it. It was like black claws. He said, and then I look up, he goes, and I see this thing just kind of standing there on the roof, like maybe not even 6 feet away from me and my dad. And it was standing there. And the only thing you could really make out of it, like he said, was the foot, because the lights were going over the top of it. And he said that it looked like, kind of like a wolf's foot, like if it was a wolf, And he was like, him and his dad are staring at it, and it's just, you could see it kind of moving back and forth, kind of swaying back and forth. And they just stood there looking at it. And he said, we had to have stood there for at least 2-3 minutes. And his dad finally was like, okay, get behind me, and was going to try to protect him, And he said that it didn't move. And then he began to yell down to his mother, the kid's mother, which was his wife, and he said, hey, can you do me a favor? Can you call the police? And she's like, why? She goes, there's somebody up here on the roof. And she's like, okay. So she went inside, and she's like, are you okay? So he goes, yes, we're okay for right now. Can you please just go and call the police, because there's something up here, something. And he said that they stood at it, they stared at it for a minute, and his dad put his hand up like, what do you want? And he said that when he moved its arms, that it kind of like got down like a football player and moved its arms out like in an aggressive way. And he said that at that point, you could kind of see it began to kind of circle them. But he said one thing he did see was like it was cold. And he goes, and I could see my breath. He goes, and I could see this thing, the breath coming off of where the mouth was. Ooh. And then and there again, he said that the only thing he noticed was like where the eyes would be, were these yellowish looking slits where the eyes were. And he said it were very narrow. And he said that this thing began to move around him. And he said that the way it sounded and the way it moved, he goes, it had to have been over 450 pounds, 400 to 500 pounds.
Oh, so it was big.
It was big. And he said that his dad and him slowly backed away, and they got off of the roof. And then he said that this thing, they saw a tree move and sway that was in the neighbor's yard. And they saw it, because this was in town. This wasn't out in the country. And he said that the tree kind of swayed, and he saw the branches move. So they assumed that thing had jumped into the tree. And to this day, he was like, and he just told me this not too long ago. And he was like, to this day, he goes, I've always wondered what that was. He's like, it terrified me and my dad. He goes, it was a scary, terrible experience.
And it was cloaked the whole time?
Yeah, it was like you could see. When it moved, you could see like the glimmery kind of movement of it.
Right, yeah.
And he said that when his dad threw his arms out and said, what do you want? It got down almost mimicking his dad, but almost like in a stance, like it was going to tackle somebody.
Yeah.
And he said he remembers the weird looking foot.
Now that's aggressive.
That is weird, yeah.
Very aggressive.
And I got one more, and we're going to close it out. What are we doing on time?
About an hour.
Okay. We're gonna do one more. And we're going to close this one out, and I'm going to save the best for last. I think this is probably the best one. This happened in near Lake Cato. Now, if anybody knows Lake Cato, we've gone over it before. It is a naturally occurring lake here in Texas, and there are areas around Cato Lake, or Lake Cato, however you want to say it, where the people to this day claim that they see Indians, like real live flesh and blood Indians. It was a guy that was climbing a pole, working for the telephone company. It was a very, very, very popular story, and he was shot in the leg by an arrow by a Native American that looked like somebody like wearing a loincloth. I'm talking, this happened back in like the 70s or 80s, something like that. It wasn't that long ago. And he's like, what is this guy? Is he from a time warp or what? Yeah. There's areas around there that the satellite can't penetrate because it's considered jungle because it's so dense. There's so much foliage and vegetation around that lake, you can't penetrate it. So what ended up happening was, and you guys have already heard the story, but I'll for the audience, there was a husband and wife. They're now married, but that time they were dating. They were going out, and they decided, hey, let's go camping. Let's go to Caddo Lake. And so they were in a little boat, and they were rowing, and he had to use the bathroom. And so he tells his girlfriend, he's like, look, I'm going to go ashore and use the bathroom because I can't hold it anymore. And he said that he told her he was going to take a leak, but in reality, he had to do the number 2. So he pulls up and he goes, I'm gonna go into the woods a little bit. And she's like, why? And he goes, oh, I'm just going to go in here, and like he didn't want to tell her, hey, I have to take a deuce, because he's still in that stage where you got to try to impress, there's this kind of the phoniness of whatever.
No one ever smells bad.
Yeah, everybody's perfect. There's nobody farting in bed or whatever, which my wife knows I never did anyway. She knows that. Yeah. But anyways, he decided to go, and nature called, and so he went, and he said he felt uneasy, and he said the whole time that they were in the boat that they felt, and I've heard this before, people who've gone out there, who've been hunting and fishing and things, and saying that they feel weird around that lake. And like there's some sort of ominous presence there. And some people even say they feel like it's evil. Mm. But he got out, went to use the restroom, and while he's squatted down doing what he was trying to do, he hears like a twig snap. And he looks over to his left, and he sees something move, but it was like the sunlight was reflecting off of something, and it was, there again, it was like it was clear, like you couldn't make out exactly what it was. And he thought, is there somebody there? So he's like, hey, and nobody answered. So then he decides to take a stick and toss it in the direction of this thing. And it bounced off of what he called an invisible entity. He goes, it was pretty much invisible. I could see right through it. He's like, but for whatever reason, the stick kind of bounced off of it. And then he said that he saw like an arm like move up and down, kind of like he saw something move. And he thought, oh no, it's a humanoidal shape, And he said that it looked like it was small, like there was a small one to the left of this other one that he saw, and that one like kind of took off, and it kind of went around like it was going behind him, and then he thought, oh no, this thing's going to come around behind me and attack me. And then he saw another one off to the right, and then the one that he threw the stick that was really big, it stood up. And it was large. He said it was probably 8 feet tall. And he could see the top of its head kind of like shimmering all the way down its legs and arms, And he said it was definitely two arms, 2 legs. It was big. And then he said at that point he heard like a loud roar, like, roar! And this thing, he said that it was so loud and it was so vicious that it was like that infrasound that we've talked about. Like the guy that had the Dogman encounter over here by the lake, where it reverberated through his chest. He said he felt it through his head, and he said he gave him a headache, and he felt like his ears were going to bleed. And he just pulled his pants up, and he just took off, and he stumbled, the wrong way toward from the boat, the canoe. And he went and he started wading through the water, and he goes, oh no. And he realized he was a good 30, 40 feet, from where the boat was. So he was just wading through the water to get back up to it. And he's like, we got to go. And he said that she's like, what's wrong? And he goes, we got to go. And they got in the boat and they started paddling away from it. And when they paddled away from that spot, they heard like splashing in the water, and they could look back and see the water moving. Like there were these entities in the water. moving toward them, and they could see the water splashing off the front of these entities.
Yeah.
So they weren't alone, and these things were chasing him and his now wife. She was hysterical and screaming and crying and freaking out, and he was just like, keep paddling. And eventually, they turned and they looked, and they saw the water still and calm, and they weren't behind them anymore. And he goes, I don't know if we just got away or if they just let us go. He goes, I really don't think that we just got away. I think they just let us go. And I was going to add one more interesting thing after that story. Here's something that happened that may or may not be cloaking. And I was actually talking to Ken Gerhardt earlier tonight, and Ken had brought up an interesting thought about how, just kind of off topic but on topic, if we could ever get people's descriptions of Dogman, and we could get a forensic sketch artist to do a rendering of it.
Right.
And maybe we could do that same thing with these creatures, and then we could compare, like the color and everything, and see how close this patterning is of these entities, because they're not completely invisible, or people wouldn't be, But here's a story. I'll end tonight's show with this story. It's a little bonus story here. This happened to a couple, and I believe this was in Temple, Texas, and it's not far from here. And they were working in an office park or whatever, a building, and they were working late. It was a husband and wife. They're married now. At the time, she was the secretary, and she worked for him, and they ended up getting married. But they were walking out to the car late, and they hear something in the trash can moving around that's only about 10 to 12 feet away from them. And, they have the lids or whatever. This didn't happen that long ago. And they heard the lid like go up and down, like boom, and they're like, oh. And his wife was like, that must be a raccoon or something in there. And then the lid of the trash can pops up, and they see this wolf-headed looking creature, snout and everything, just staring right at them. And then it just goes back down. And they were like, let's get out of here. And so then they start to get in the vehicle and start to panic. And he's like, dude, I'm like dropping my keys, and I'm trying to, I can't even get the clicker to open the door. I'm freaking out. He said, then the door, the lid opens again, and there's just a hand right there. And he said it was like a grayish colored hand, and his wife had this little flashlight, and she pointed it at the thing. He goes, and I got a good look at a little like this claws on this big gray hand. And he said, I told her, turn the flashlight off, okay, because this thing is going to become angry. And it popped its head back up and kind of looked around, and they both said that it was chewing on something. It was eating something. And they said that it was looking right at them, and they shined right on these yellowish eyes. And for a split second, it was almost like it had disappeared, but then they could still see the eyes. And then they panned back, and they saw this creature still sitting there, and it was just staring right at them. And then they said they got in their vehicles, and they were driving out, and they heard like the door or the lid of the trash can slam again as they were driving off. Now, this place had cameras. That's the interesting part. So the next day he goes and he talks to the people that run the place, and he tells them, hey, this I saw some really large, he didn't want to tell them I saw a freaking werewolf eating something in a trash can. Who's going to believe that? So he said, I saw this really large raccoon. I think we have a raccoon problem. You need to go look at the footage, because there was this huge raccoon, and it messed with me and my wife last night, and it threw the lid off, whatever. And the guy was like, okay. So the security, they looked at the footage, and he went down on a lunch break, and he talked to the security guard, and the guard's like, well, we actually did look at the camera, and we saw something interesting. And he said that at the same time that he claims that this happened, they see the lid of the trash can going up and down. They don't see anything making it go up and down. And then ultimately the trash can lid goes flying up and off, and backwards. And then they see the trash kind of moving, and then that's it. So on camera, there was nothing there. But they did see some sort of a blur on the camera, but that was it. He goes, you couldn't make out. He said it would look like a ghost. Like if you put it on a paranormal show about ghosts, right. He said it would be like, wow, compelling footage of a trash can lid moving up by itself. being like a ghost throwing up a trash can lid. But in reality, him and his wife saw this wolf-looking entity inside of the trash can. And that was a story that I had told Ken earlier when we were talking on the phone. But that's very interesting, and we're talking about this Glimmer Man.
Now that sounds like something supernatural to me.
I mean, but it made itself invisible.
This one's for you, Anthony, because you might relate to this more. But what do you think your eyes, like if you had to say like the refresh rate of your eyes, what do you think that's set at? Maybe a good 160, 180 frames per second, something like that? I think they can actually like...
I think it's actually, it differs from person to person.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, like whenever I switch from my TV, which is a 60 hertz refresh rate, to my computer monitor, which is a 144 hertz refresh rate,
right,
I could tell the difference. So that tells me that the human eye can perceive at the very least somewhere between 60 and 144 hertz or frames a second, somewhere in that range at the very least.
Right. So here's what I just thought, right? So I think the reason that would happen is because from all these other encounters, we've already established that when you look at this thing, whether it's camouflage, whether it's just a byproduct of whatever it is, when you see it, it looks very fractal, pixelated, very stuttered, I guess is another word. Like
glitchy.
It just looks very not like within your,
maybe you're
frame
not
of reference.
seeing
Yeah, like you're
within your range of sight.
Yeah, you were looking at it with the naked eye, which can look up to 144 hertz at least refresh. And for the people at home that might not know what that means, when you look at your computer monitors or your TV and your and your monitors are giving off frames per second, meaning it's shooting lights and creating the image in front of you. So our eyes can perceive much higher than that, and we only see what we believe is like 16 bits worth of information because it's just so hard to fathom. So a camera, which doesn't record or playback for like the most part, you would say, right? Like most security cameras are pretty low.
Yeah, they're pretty low quality.
Yeah, they're pretty low quality.
You have to spend too much money to get a good one. So most systems are pretty cheap.
Most companies won't. We know that. And it would be fair to say that a camera probably wouldn't pick up any of the detail the naked human eye would,
and within this kind of situation. So I kind of think that's what's happening. I mean, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I talked about something along those lines on a previous episode about how all matter has a certain frequency at which it vibrates, and the human eye can perceive a certain set range of frequencies. So if something looks like it disappears, it could be because somehow, some way, it starts vibrating either above or below that range of frequency which the human eye can perceive.
Yeah, I would argue probably above because it's moving in one area very quickly, and at some point you're just not going to be able to pick that up with the naked human eye. So I think that's what might be happening in this one particular situation, but I don't know. That's just my theory.
I noticed one thing, with the exception of this last story, that if you were to tell the rest of these stories without mentioning the transparency of this entity, they sound like Bigfoot encounters.
Kinda, yeah. Except for like I said, the rake cephalopod.
Yeah, except for that one.
Different too, and But and then of course the one when my friend was a kid, that sounded almost like a demon or a ghost, but it was like it was able to cloak it's. I don't know, folks. That's all we got for tonight. Hopefully we didn't get any answers. You all just going to ponder and be weirded out and freaked out for the rest of your lives. Well, anyways, folks, that's all the time we have for tonight, and we thank you for listening. Be sure and tune in for our Q&As on Tuesdays. If you got any questions about the episode or any past episodes, you can ask those questions, and I'll just sit there with a dumb look on my face and go, I don't know. Just kidding. I'll do my best to try to answer it. Thank you for listening, and good night.
Good night.
Good night.